Well, as I tell my faith story today, I'm not going to have anyone asking me questions. I'm just going to tell at least part of my faith story and share that with the people of our Saviors and whoever else may be watching. So, my faith story, I'm going to kind of talk about the people and the events or situations in my life that have shaped my faith, made my faith stronger. And that begins, of course, with my parents who took me to be baptized at Red Oak Grove Lutheran Church, a country church in rural Austin, Minnesota. But it was my parents then that raised me in this faith. And so I loved going to Red Oak Grove. I loved Vacation Bible School and Sunday school and any of the things we might have done there. It's where I learned mostly the stories of our faith and learned how to pray. There are other people as well in my life, and one of the really big influences in my faith was my grandma Jolson. That's my mom's mom, and she was someone who just so freely talked about her faith. So if we were at her home, we could see on her little coffee table her Bible and her devotional book. And if we stayed overnight, we participated in devotions with her. But she talked about praying for us, all of her grandchildren and children. So she was a big faith influence, and she was someone who kept learning. All the way till her year in the nursing home, she continued to go to Bible studies and grow in her faith. The rest of my grandparents were also influential for me in my faith. I was one of these people. I was really lucky that both sets of my grandparents went to the same church as we did, and so they were very much a part of my faith life. In addition, at Red Oak Grove, I can remember many people who influenced me, but two in particular, and I don't think they would be people who even knew that they were influencing my faith so much at the time, but those two people are Virginia Davis, who was my junior high Sunday school teacher and taught catechism to us, and just maybe her knowledge, her comfort in teaching the catechism, but mostly her willingness to let us ask questions. And I was someone who had a lot of questions. And then also my children's choir director, Orline Peterson. I think of how we learned so much of our faith in singing. And so every Wednesday, we were singing in the children's choir with Orline, and so learned a lot about my faith through singing in that children's choir. As I went through high school and I went to college, college was a time where I had a lot of questions, as I think a lot of young adults have, and I was very fortunate in that I had friends I could talk to about it, and one of my friends named Heather, we used to stay up late into the night discussing faith and what it meant for all of the issues that we were coming upon as young adults and what was going on at college. And so just being able to talk and question and dig in and disagree really helped me grow in my faith. So after college, I had dreams like every other college kid of what I wanted to do, but it was 1984 and the job market wasn't very good. And so I moved back home, not something I had wanted to do. I moved back home, and between my struggles in feeling, that not being able to find that job I wanted, and then in some of the issues and developments in my family with my parents, it turned out to be an even more difficult year. It was a year, though, that I'm really grateful that I was at home because I was a big help to my family at that time. But during that time, that's probably one of the events in my life that really made me cling to God. And so for me, it wasn't even favorite Bible passages that helped me in that year, although I knew many of them. It was really reading the Psalms, and those Psalms of lament, and those Psalms where, the writer cries out to God. That's what it was for me. And I was so grateful to have that scripture that spoke to every feeling, my frustration, my anger, my worry, my fear. And so I would read the Psalms nightly and found great comfort and help and strength in those Psalms. And to this day, I tell confirmation students about that. But it was also that year that kind of began me on the track of youth ministry. I first, after that year, I did some political work in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and it was through that political work that I met Greg. And during that year, I also started seeing advertisements for youth directors. In my little country church, I didn't know there was such a thing as youth ministry or youth directors. And I saw these advertisements and I thought, I could do that. And I think I'd like that. And so I ended up kind of falling into a youth ministry job in Marshall, Minnesota while I was dating Greg. I was at First Lutheran in Marshall. And during that year, I was engaged to Greg, but I also learned that after I was engaged and met some people from our synod, that they heard I was moving to New Ulm and said, our Saviors is going to be hiring a youth and Christian education director. So I moved to New Ulm, and Greg and I decided to join our Saviors. And I just have to tell you what a big influence hospitality is when somebody visits, because Greg and I visited and we sat in front of Harlan and Darnell Mammon. We didn't know them, but they welcomed us, asked if we had any questions, but just generally made us feel welcome. So I've thought back to that often and in how we want people to experience coming inside these doors. But anyway, I'd been here a few months. They advertised for a youth and Christian education director, and I decided to apply. I got the job. I didn't think I'd be here for the long term because, who knew any youth director that was over, 30 years old? So I had no idea what my path would be. Yet for years, my mom had been planting seeds that I would be a good pastor. She kept telling me that through the years. But so I was a youth and Christian education director here for 23 years. And this church has shaped me a great deal. I think of all those Wednesday nights in our youth rooms with the youth piled in there, the discussions we had, and how much our youth influenced me, as well as all the different pastors I worked with that have shaped my faith and taught me so much, and along with all of you at our Saviors. So during these 23 years, my mom kept telling me I should think about being a pastor. People here started suggesting I might be a good pastor. And I one time told my mom, I'm not going to be a pastor. I live in New Ulm. I'm on a farm. There's no way I can be a pastor. And my mom looked at me and she said, I don't care what you say. I know you'll be a pastor. And so time wore on, and finally decided that, really this is what God had intended me to do all along, to work in the church, to be in ministry. So I decided to go to seminary to get a master's in youth and family ministry. But I was only there in class 1 or 2 times. This was online, my first class. And I was sitting in worship on a Wednesday night during Lent, and I just clearly knew at that moment, it was almost like, God shaking me or, knocking me on the head and just saying, don't you get it? You're called to be a pastor. And at that moment, I expressed to God silently, all right, I get it. Yes, I know, I'm going to be a pastor. And so then I began the long journey through seminary, working full-time, having children, being married, living on a farm, and made it through seminary and graduated. And then, of course, I was called to Augustana and East Fadal Ministries in St. James, another group of absolutely wonderful people who taught me much about faith. I'm always learning, even as I'm teaching. Also, I just need to say what a big influence my mother-in-law, Chloe Klinkner, was on my faith, how much she taught me. She was a devout, faith-filled, faithful Catholic We had so many great conversations about faith and stewardship, and I couldn't have gotten through seminary without her either. So, I was in St. James for 8 years, and then I was called back here to be the senior pastor. And I came back here. There's so many new people, lots of people I knew. But again, the people, I tell you about the people that have influenced my faith because, how would we know faith? How would we know God? How would we know God's love for us in Jesus if there wasn't somebody to tell us? And so it began with my parents, and it continues to this day while I am a pastor, I am also learning from all of you. And as you share your faith, as you live your lives and use your talents and gifts, I'm learning from you, and you've inspired me. And who I am as a pastor has been largely shaped by the people at Our Saviors, beginning way back in 1988 when I became the Director of Youth and Christian Education Ministries. So that's a little bit about my journey of faith. Let's see if I had anything else I wanted to say. No, I think mostly that's what I wanted to tell you is the people that have shaped my faith, and then really the toughest time in my life of clinging to those Psalms and clinging to God that gave me strength. And I think it took my faith to a different place in that I knew I had to completely trust in God, and I did. And God got me through it and had me on a path that I had no idea what it would be, but I'm so grateful that this is the direction that God has taken me, and so grateful to serve here at Our Saviors for now a total of, I guess, about 25 years as a youth director and pastor, along with the other great churches I was able to serve. It's been a privilege to be here. So thank you for your partnership in ministry. A really huge thank you to all of the children and youth I have worked with, the trips we've gone on, the discussions in the youth room, the youth gatherings, the mission trips, FBI and fugitives, and mystery suppers, and all of the great fun we had together while we were growing in our faith together. So thank you for that privilege, and God's blessings to all of you.